Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Lauren Van Schilfgaarde, a very traditional Indian name, I know. I am originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am a tribal member of Cochiti Pueblo, which is a federally recognized tribe and one of the 19 pueblos in the state of New Mexico. And most importantly for you, I am a recent law school graduate, UCLA 2012. I would sincerely like to thank you for having me here today. Thank you to the National Diversity Pre-Law Association, to Evangeline, wherever she is, for all of the magic that she's been doing behind the scenes, to the National Native American Bar Association for supporting me here to be here today, and especially to all of you for being here today, especially being so welcoming to someone who is from so very far west of the Mississippi. Law school was, without a doubt, a pivotal moment in my life, and I am positive it will be a pivotal moment for you. I think like a lot of people in this room, I was first generation to go to college, first generation to go to law school. My parents didn't attend college, and I didn't have any attorneys in my family. I think relatively common. That's okay. What it did mean is that we had no idea what we were doing. I had very supportive parents. They really, really wanted me to go to law school. And I have this memory. I'm coming back after my first semester. I just took my first semester law school exams. And maybe you've heard about these. It is intense. It is crazy. I went through this whole rigmarole, took my exams. I'm recovering. I'm putting myself together. It's like, okay, Lauren. But it's Christmas time, shed all of that. I get on the airplane, I get to Albuquerque, and my mom looks at me and is like, God, you look terrible. It's like, oh, I was trying so hard. That's okay. They didn't know how to support me, and I didn't really know what I needed for support, but we figured it out. And I want to say we because regardless of who's included in your family circle, or how far away they are from the law school that you end up attending, you're all going to be in it together. This is a 3-year journey, and so be kind to each other. I promise that you'll make it as bumpy of a road as it may be. Unlike me, you are going to be far less ignorant of what's coming than I was. And in part, that's to do with events like this, which is brilliant. I think as many of you know, our legal profession suffers more than any other profession to be diverse. Our diversity pipeline, this is all lingo that I've learned recently, is leaking at almost every juncture. From the LSAT to admissions to matriculation to the bar exam, we're losing people of color more and more. I had to take the LSAT twice. It's not my recommended path to go, but just know that it's an option. I've had friends that have had to take the bar exams twice. Part of this, I think, is we know that minorities struggle taking exams, and we know that they know that, and we start validating the stereotype threat that we're not going to perform very well, and we start freaking out, and it's a thing that we have to deal with. Events like this are intended to assuage some of that fear, some of that anxiety, and these have been shown to work. So don't worry, be calm. You're going to be brilliant. It's going to be fantastic. One of the things I really like about events like this is it's people of color coming together. I have had the privilege of working with the National Native American Bar Association this year, which I absolutely love. And one of the things I love about it is I get to work with other bar associations of color. I was talking with Tina, and I have just loved working with the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association this year. When we come together, we are fierce. We are doing brilliant work out there. And I encourage you to latch on to that when you're in law school. Join your bar association of color. The Native American Law Students Association was one of my favorite parts of law school. They're some of my best friends. They're now my peers and my colleagues. But also consider joining other bars of color. We're open, we're not exclusive, and especially if there's a Native American Law Students Association at your law school, they are probably very small. They could use some allies. join. There are some really great events going on. We're having our conference next week in Phoenix. If you're in town, come join us. It'll be a great time. The other great thing is this is where you're going to meet older students, which is a really critical key to success in law school, primarily because it's from these older students that you're going to get some used textbooks that you don't have to buy brand new for $400. This is where you're going to get some outlines for classes that are going to give you a real nice head start in your notes for your class. This is where you're going to learn what restaurants to go to and which ones to avoid, which professors to take, which professors to avoid. Key things that I can't communicate to you right now. As I mentioned NALSA, I wanted to switch a little bit and talk about natives. Even at your law schools, it's not probable that you're going to be exposed to these issues, and I'll talk a little bit about why. Terminology, I'm going to use phrases like Indian, Native American, American Indian, and Native interchangeably. These are all generally accepted terms within the community and within the legal profession. Unlike other terms, I had this really jarring experience yesterday. I went to the American Indian, the Museum of the American Indian, which is a great museum. I really recommend going to it. And there was a class getting ready to go, and their teacher, presumably, was getting ready to lead them in, and he had a Redskins cap on, about to go into the museum. It was just like, oh, weird, man. It was very weird. Anyways, that kind of like weird, like out-of-body experience is going to become more and more frequent in your life as you progress through law school. So while people of color are underrepresented in the legal profession, we know they are dismally. Natives are woefully underrepresented. Anyone have any idea about how many natives are in the country right now, total, non-lawyers? 1 million? 10 million? 2 million? Close. There are 5 million of us. We're not that many, but we're more than you think we are. So I was preparing for this speech, and the Ford Foundation conducted this study back in 1967. And I thought I read that in 1967, 25% of American Indians didn't have access to an attorney. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not what I read. In 1967, the Ford Foundation estimated that there were 25 American Indian attorneys total. That's not very many. It's a little bit better today, but honestly, it's not that much better. At 5 million people, we represent 1.6% of the population. In 2010, they estimated that there were 2,640 American Indian attorneys. That represents 0.3% of the legal profession. We need another 11,000 American Indian attorneys in order to be proportional in the legal profession. There's a lot of work to be done. Because of these low numbers, a lot of diversity studies that are being conducted, especially by the American Bar Association, just don't include Native Americans. We're either completely forgotten about, or if we are considered, we're a footnote stuck at the beginning that says there were not enough statistically significant number of American Indians participating to be included in this report. So that means we just don't know very much about American Indian attorneys. What's holding us back? What's motivating us? What's preventing us from getting into law school, preventing us from graduating? We don't know. So last year, the National Native American Bar Association conducted its own study, specifically to get at this huge gap in the literature. They surveyed about 500 American Indian attorneys, which represents about 20% of the field, which I didn't take statistics, but I guess is statistically significant. And we learned a couple of really interesting things. One is that it's really complex being Indian. I don't think this is exclusive to American Indians, but it's certainly a big piece. We are not just a racial category, but we're a political classification. We're members of federally recognized tribes, which are considered domestic dependent nations in this state. We are the third sovereign. That means we have both a racial and a political relationship with the United States federal government. We have our own title in the U.S. Code, Title 25. It means that when I say I'm American Indian, I also mean that I'm a citizen of my tribal nation. Some American Indians are not citizens of their tribal nation. This is for a lot of complex reasons. You may have heard the term blood quantum used. Tribes have different measures for what they consider to be a citizen. Some tribes are not federally recognized. Again, I was at the Museum of the American Indian yesterday, and they have a really great exhibit on Native Hawaiians. I highly recommend it. Native Hawaiians are not considered federally recognized within the United States, even though we identify them as an indigenous community within the country. There's a phenomenon called box checking. None of you would ever be guilty of this, but some law students think they're going to get a leg up on their law school application by clicking the American Indian box, even though they do not identify as American Indian otherwise. We know this is a phenomenon because the number of students checking the American Indian box versus the number of people checking the box on the census are very different. Those are very different numbers. Nevertheless, it's a phenomenon, and so American Indians have a real hesitation when they identify as American Indian in the greater community. Another really interesting thing we learned from this study, for most law students, the big factor, the big thing driving us to apply to law school is our desire for a challenging and rewarding career. This is a big factor for me. I hope it's a big factor for you. That was not the number one reason cited for Native attorneys. For them, their biggest motivation was to give back to their community. They wanted to fight for justice for Indians and fight for the betterment of Indian people. Like I said, I think this has a lot to do with our unique relationship to the federal government. Indian law is really weird. Out of the 200 plus American Bar Association accredited law schools in the country, only about 60 offer any kind of course on federal Indian law, and yet it is incredibly complex. I think some of you have been mildly exposed to some of these issues: broken treaties, whole removal, Trail of Tears. All of this was happening. However, a lot of the most devastating policies affecting Indian country happened in the 20th century and are continuing to happen today. For example, just to give you a taste of some of the work I do, criminal jurisdiction in Indian country. What is criminal jurisdiction? I'll give you a little law school right here. What does it mean to have criminal jurisdiction? Yes, exactly. It's the power of a court to hear a case against a criminal defendant. So tribes are nations. Tribes are sovereign nations with their own laws, and they have criminal jurisdiction. However, criminal jurisdiction currently depends on the race of the victim, the race of the perpetrator, and the nature of the crime that it was committed. So if we go to my nation, Coche de Pueblo, and you steal from me in the parking lot of my aunt who we just had dinner with, then the federal government has jurisdiction over you exclusively. If I stole from you, then my tribe has jurisdiction over me exclusively. But if we were at my cousin's tribe in California, then the state would have jurisdiction over us both, but they would share jurisdiction with the tribe. Now that's just theft. This changes dramatically depending on the nature of the crime. This changes on what tribal nation you're at. If you're in the state of Alaska, the answer is going to be drastically different. If you're in the state of Maine, the answer is going to be drastically different. The consequences get real quick. Currently, tribes lack jurisdiction over non-Indians because of a 1978 Supreme Court case where they just flipped a switch and said no more jurisdiction over non-Indians. Tribes, the feds have jurisdiction, but they're not really in the business of prosecuting theft. That's not what the FBI agent became an FBI agent for. That's not what the U.S. attorney became a U.S. attorney for. What this means is that, particularly with sexual assault, there's a lot of under-prosecution going on. So much so that Congress, this very Congress in 2013, actually responded and changed the jurisdictional laws just for domestic violence. So now tribes can prosecute a non-Indian exclusively for the crime of domestic violence if they match all of these requirements that they can do so. And note that it's just domestic violence. It's no underlying crime such as sexual assault. So if the rapist did not previously know his victim, no jurisdiction. But it's progress, and I am thankful for that. So this is just a taste that Indian law is crazy. You should take it. You should take federal Indian law. If I've given you any kind of taste, it's that you had no idea what any of this was going on. Most attorneys that have passed the bar exam don't know that tribes are a third sovereign in this country with their own laws on the books. We were not invited to the Constitutional Convention, which means the Constitution doesn't apply to us. That doesn't mean Congress doesn't have authority over us and exerts that authority, but there's no constitutional separation of church and state, for example. My tribe is a theocracy. The religious faction is the government. Not true at all tribes, but it is at mine. So anyways, I wanted to bring that up because I can. But as Mary stated, this doesn't just affect Indian country. There are very real-world applications that are at play right now. There's a major Supreme Court case that I hope will, at worst case, be a 4-4 decision now that Justice Scalia is no longer with us. But I have high hopes. It concerns there was a sexual assault of a minor conducted at a Dollar General store taking place in Indian country by the manager of the store. The Dollar General signed a lease agreement with the tribe, Mississippi Choctaw, and so the family wanted to sue Dollar General for damages committed against their young minor. It is now in the Supreme Court whether or not the tribe has the civil jurisdiction to hear this case about a sexual assault that was committed against its own tribal member on its own tribal land. The consequences are real. You might have heard of this Indian child welfare case coming out of California. A foster family is extremely upset about a foster child that was removed from their home. However, there's been tons and tons of bad media because the attorneys didn't know that they were violating the Indian Child Welfare Act, an act passed again by our Congress back in 1978 that said so many Indian children are being removed from homes and placed in non-Indian families, mostly white families, that it's become a national epidemic, and we need to step in. And those attorneys were then violating that law. If you're going to practice child welfare law, it will be critical that you understand what the Indian Child Welfare Act is. However, most family law cases simply don't teach ICWA. This is something we need to change. So anyways, I wanted to bring it back down to our level a little bit, get out of the weeds of Indian law, even though I love living in the weeds of Indian law. I am not at the pinnacle of my career. I'm not even close to the pinnacle of my career. I'm still a very young attorney. But I wanted to give you a taste that you don't have to be at the pinnacle of your career to start tasting the sweet nectar of why it's so great to be an attorney. Even though we all have aspirations of being president and attorney general and all of these great things, as a young attorney, there are still really, really beautiful things that you can accomplish. Lee, I think, is a great example of a young attorney who is taking a leadership role. The leadership roles are vacant right now. We are in dire need of young attorneys like you to fill those positions. And if you are able and willing, we are going to throw them at you. As a young attorney, you're going to have the opportunity to be working one-on-one with clients. You're going to have the opportunity to sit on these boards. You're going to be able to help influence your employer on who they hire and don't hire. The power and the respect and the value of your work product is going to come a lot faster than you think it will, especially after you take those 1L exams and feel really, really uncertain about what you know and don't know. So I wanted to leave just with a couple of tidbits that I considered helpful in law school. These will probably not be helpful because until you're there, you don't really know what's coming. Diversify your caseload. I knew I was interested in Indian law, but I didn't know how much I was going to love federal income tax, for example, or how much business associations was going to be critical to my work in a nonprofit association. If you're interested in business law, take environmental law. If you're interested in IP, take civil rights. There are so many great courses out there, and you just don't know what you don't know. And in order to be effective attorneys, we need to not just be an expert in our field, but an expert in their field too. The curve sucks. There's no way around it. But I think once you embrace that it sucks and that you're no longer going to be getting straight A's, that can be really empowering. People get really obsessed about grades in law school. You're going to as well, because that's just the way it is. But in about a week after graduation, your grades do not matter anymore. So don't get too worked up about it. The bar exam is real. I encourage you to take a bar exam course, just like the LSAT is real. I encourage you to take an LSAT course. But I also encourage you, if any of you have ever been exposed to the Ojibwe medicine wheel, it is 4 different colors. It represents the 4 different directions, the 4 seasons, and the 4 stages of life. And what it really is saying is that in order to be healthy, we need to be balanced. This means that in order to do well, you can't just be mentally prepared. You need to be mentally prepared. You also need to be physically healthy. You need to be emotionally healthy, and you need to be spiritually healthy. And so keep that in mind as you're approaching your studies and as you're approaching career, that you need all 4 in order to be a successful attorney. This was advice that was given, and I hate this advice, but I'm going to give it in anyways. The way that you're going to do well in law school is going to depend on you, and so, be true to yourself. But I wanted to give you insight of what that meant for me. For me, that meant going to yoga before class, and then eating a really big bowl of tater tots. I loved it. It meant I really needed to do all of the reading in order to feel comfortable, but outlining was not for me. That just didn't work for me. For some students, they needed to outline all of their notes, and that's what's worked. It meant I could read a textbook, but I didn't have to highlight and underline every single line. For some students, it did. It meant that, especially with the bar exam, but also for law school, it worked if I would get up at 8 and start studying, but that at 8 o'clock at night, I stopped, and I had a glass of wine with dinner. This is a long game, not a short game. You're not going to be able to pull all-nighters throughout law school. You're not going to be able to pull all-nighters in your career. And so keep in mind the long game. And finally, the moments in which you're going to be asked to represent your race in the classroom, you're going to be asked to represent an entire culture. You're going to be the only person of color in a room. The time when someone is going to say something so ignorant and off base and crazy, all of those moments are about to intensify. That's just the nature of law school. It's the nature of the discussions that we're having in the classroom. So, strap in, get ready. It's going to be a great time. But I encourage you to approach those moments thoughtfully. You are about to be in a room full of intelligent and very argumentative people. These are lawyers. You're not expected to be the ambassador for your race all the time. But those moments will come, and if you're willing, I encourage you to step up to the plate and take that opportunity to educate. But don't take them to heart. People mean well. In college, I was first asked, "What am I?" revealing that I was racially ambiguous. I didn't know that until I went to college. But it was in law school when someone complimented me on how actually smart I was. Bless their hearts. They just don't know any better. But you know better, and you're here for your own education. And so I really, really would like to congratulate you for getting this far. Law school is a trip, but it was a great trip. I don't regret it for a single moment. And I'm here because I'm passionate about the work that I do. And so I urge you to keep your passion in mind. Thank you.